must band together to oppose it. This is for the sake of land justice. Thank you. Dr. K.K. Kwok. Madam Deputy, originally I thought I didn't have to talk about the East Lantau metropolis or the Lantau vision, since it's so ridiculous. But then I have heard more ridiculous arguments from the pro-establishment camp, and I must speak up. In this session, we should be talking about land and forging a consensus. What kind of consensus? When did Hong Kong people agree for the government to use $100 billion to build this castle in the sand? The pro-establishment camp said that 270,000 people are waiting for public rental housing and we don't have enough land. It is because you and the SAR administration conspired. In 2002, Madam Deputy, your party was involved, and you stopped the building of HOS. You defended the administration so that the administration could do so much injustice. Now you should reflect upon yourselves. This time around, there are two major objectives of land supply discussion. Actually, you have slapped Mr. Stanley Wong on the face. He has not even concluded his work. But I will not spend more time on Lantau tomorrow. I like to talk about shared use of land. Recently, with regard to HOS application, as you know, 260,000 people applied, but there are only 4,431 units. What did the administration say? They were slow in land sales. In 2015-16, only 1,800 units. And you are telling people you are providing housing units to them. They have to wait 18 years, and yet they would not get a unit. 15,000 units a year. I'm sure you are going to mention the 25,500 to be provided on top of MTR stations. But what about people who are getting married, and what about people from Greater Bay Area? Hong Kong people have no luck. I'd like to quote from somebody. The AD, former AD of the Planning Department, Mr. Ng Wing Kang. Luckily, he came up with a just statement. He said that land sharing is the best example of corrupt governance. How can you work together with developers in order to provide land and housing? Aren't you asking the tiger for its skin? They will, of course, think about discounting infrastructure cost, and then the developers will pay you lip service. But when did you see them do it? You have a high land premium policy, and developers have so many units hoarded up. They will wait for the prices to escalate. Will they be so stupid as to share the land with you? You must be crazy. If you really want to provide housing, we have 6,000 hectares of land, including idle land, military-sized golf course, and land in the hands of developers. There are 6,000 hectares of land, but you don't use those. In the next 5 years, there will be fewer than 100,000 PRH units for 270,000 people who are waiting. Some people say you're asking the tiger for the skin, but in fact, you are banding up with developers and not to do a good job. You must show the determination to use the land that is basking in the sun. If you don't do it, if you don't ask the developers to develop land into housing, you are just fooling the people. Traffic and transport. Without the artificial island, you say there should not be any railway for NT-Northwest. Tuen Mun, Yuen Long, and Tin Shui Wai, you are moving people into these districts. And on top of it, you say, if you give me $100 billion to build a castle in the sand, I will also give you a railway. But originally, there was a plan to build a railway from Jinmun and Yunlong going into the urban district. Why don't you just do it instead of linking this up with the artificial island? The administration is shameful. Next, I'd like to talk about environment. In 1998, there was the first paper on solid waste management. We have waited a full 20 years before you came up with the bill. South Korea did it in 1995 and Taipei in the year 2000. But it's better late than never, but some pro-establishment members are already saying don't charge anything. And I'm telling the administration, if you again buckle, Hong Kong will continue to have garbage dumps. I heard this joke from the pro-establishment camp I'd like to share with you. An island's representative from the pro-establishment camp said, we have more extreme weather and a 100-year return storm would be more common. And he was referring to South Bay and Hang Fa Chun. He was saying about rubbish. And I thought the next thing he would oppose to the artificial island. But indeed, that was not the case. He said you should build the artificial island. And our former official, Mr. Lam Chiu-ying, you also thought that he was right in his statements. He said that in Khao Yi Chau, the waves could be as high as 5 meters, and if it's a 100-year return storm, the waves could be as high as 17 meters. I don't blame Dr. Loy Kwok because he's going to share the $100 billion, and I don't blame Mr. Abraham Sheikh because he represents the developers who are poised to make money. But what about the other pro-establishment camp members? They are speaking nonsense, and they are harming Hong Kong. We are talking about 20, 30 years down the road before people can have housing on the artificial island, and they will have to remain in SDUs in the interim. You remember there was this film satirizing the situation of people waiting for HOS, and Hong Kong people are in such an appalling situation, and yet you are going for these reclamation projects which are going to harm Hong Kong. This is not going to benefit Hong Kong. Does any other member wish to speak?
Secretary for Security, Madam Deputy, in the previous year, in accordance with the policy ideas and policy directions on the basis of good law enforcement, we have been able to carry out our duties. We have got good results. Sorry, just a minute, please. Just a minute, please. Dr. KK Kwok would like to call for a quorum count. Secretary, please pause.
各位同事
Members, just now I have consulted the views of different parties. I believe that between 10 and 12 tonight we're going to put the matter to the vote. I decide that we can complete the voting, so I will complete the voting on this motion before we finish the business today.
Secretary for Transport and Housing. Sorry, Secretary for Security.
Mr. President, in relation to the terrorism risk, Secretary for Security. Mr. President, currently, for the level of terrorism risk faced by Hong Kong, it is still maintained at medium. In other words, there isn't intelligence to show that we are facing a threat of terrorism attack. In April this year, we set up the Interdepartmental Counterterrorism Unit, ICTU, so that on top of the counterterrorism framework, we are providing a interdepartmental or cross-departmental counterterrorism platform so as to enhance our prevention, training, intelligence, contingency, and public education work. We'll continue to be on the alert, and we will continue to assess the situation so as to be well prepared. Mr. President, the SB, together with the Disciplined Services Departments, will take forward a four-pronged strategy covering application, research and development, analysis, and fortification of innovation technology. Say, for example, the CSD plans to introduce smart elements in prisons and make use of video analytics so as to enhance the effectiveness of management of prisons and the security levels. The Customs and Excise would make greater use of AI and big data analysis as well as computer forensic examination so as to enhance the effectiveness and the ability to detect crime. For the Immigration Department, starting from year 2021, they will have the next generation application and integration EC system so as to enhance the core immigration business, making use of innovation technology. The police will enhance the ability to use digital evidence and reconstruct digital crime scene, and they will further enhance the defense of the cybersecurity so as to protect the critical infrastructure. The FSD will also make use of big data to analyze the fire incidents and look at the fire services equipment in buildings and related inspections. There will be the change in the inspections as well as the education strategies. As far as the non-refoulement claims are concerned, in year 2016, there was a comprehensive review. As a result, we introduced many measures, and they're effective. For non-ethnic Chinese illegal immigrants and non-refoulement claimants, the numbers have come down by 80% since its peak. And for those waiting to be heard, the number has come down by 80%. And in fact, the appeal panel will continue to expedite the handling of the appeals, and the Immigration Department would also repatriate those who have been rejected. I'm grateful to the members in the relevant subcommittee, and as part of the overall review, we are going to amend the immigration ordinance so as to enhance the vetting procedure to prevent deliberate stalling or deferrals, and we would like to enhance the overall efficiency, and will enhance the power of the Immigration Department to enforce the law, to detain and to repatriate the rejected claimants. And then in terms of human trafficking, again, we will be doing our best to combat trafficking in persons, and we will protect the interests of the foreign domestic helpers, because we have the action plan to tackle trafficking in persons and to enhance protection of foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong. We'll work together with the Labour and Welfare Bureau. And then for the older industrial buildings, the stakeholders support our legislative proposals. We'll complete the drafting instructions as soon as possible. And then just last Wednesday, 31st of October, a new scheme has its application deadline reached. That is the Fire Services Safety Enhancement Subsidy Scheme. Altogether, 2,500 cases have been received by the URA. We are vetting them so as to approve them ASAP. And then for one-way permit systems, this is a systematic way to allow spouses of Hong Kong residents and their mainland-born children to come to Hong Kong to reunite with their families. Well, in fact, all the applicants are also family members of Hong Kongers, and the daily quota is 150. Of course, there are different views concerning this scheme. There are people who are in support of it, others who are against it. But of course, there are also the argument that we should uphold the need to have family reunion, and we should allow the mainland family members of Hong Kongers to come to Hong Kong as soon as possible. 1/3 of the marriages registered in Hong Kong are cross-boundary marriages. Therefore, there is a need for spouses on the mainland and their mainland-born children to come to Hong Kong on the basis of the one-way permit. So the number of split families will not be reduced, and there's still a demand for one-way permits. We'll take care of the views expressed by different quarters, and we will take into account the overall interest. In relation to the use of the quota, we'll continue to exchange our views with the mainland authorities and will reflect the views of the society. And then a word on cruelty to animals. Since April this month, we have already set up dedicated investigation teams. In the coming financial year, we are going to implement the Animal Watches scheme. And at the community level, we will work via education, publicity, investigation, intelligence collection, so as to unite the animal lovers, and would like to enhance the public awareness about the need to prevent cruelty towards animals, and will encourage the public to make timely reports, and will liaise with government departments, animal-loving organizations, and animal lovers. Mr. President, in the coming year, we'll continue to come up with visionary work strategies, and we'll look at the context in which we work. We'll provide the right conditions so as to make sure that the frontline officers will be more facilitated in discharging their duties, and then we can realize the vision of the CE to have a safe city. So I speak and I urge members to support our policy address. Thank you.
感謝主席。
Secretary for Development. Thank you, Mr. President. Just now, many members have talked about Lantau Tomorrow vision. Mr. Eddie Chu referred to the Lantau Tomorrow vision. He talked about the various studies, and he asked whether such studies will be or are related to previously carried out studies. My answer is yes. For 2030 plus study, yes, please take a look. Now, we are told in this report that in the coming 30 years, the housing units that we need would number about 1 million. Where do we get this figure? It is because of the increase in the number of households, 400,000. And subdivided units, the households are living in crowded conditions. There are 100,000 of them. Another 300,000 households affected by urban renewal. And then we have the non-local students and mobile population altogether, 100,000 households, so altogether 900,000 households. And then we have vacant units, so the total number is 1 million units. Well, the non-pro-establishment camp have also referred to such figures. In the short and medium term, we are able to get 380,000 units. And then through other means, another 220,000 units. So the total would be 500 plus. So the shortfall is 400,000 units after taking care of railway, podium development, etc. And probably we have got another 4,000 or 5,000 from other sources. So for 30 years, there will be 100,000 units. But we are still short of 200,000 units before we can meet the target considered by the 2030 plus study. But as we have already said, the estimate verges on conservative. We haven't taken care of the aspiration to have larger living space and also the need for housing when the population ages. Therefore, Lantau Tomorrow vision, in particular for Khao Yi Chow in phase 1, it is the answer. For Khao Yi Chow, according to the present estimation of the government, we can provide 150 to 160,000 units, so it can cover the shortfall that we have to face. And then another 20,000, 130,000 units will come from New Territories North, but how and where we are going to take that forward, we have yet to make decisions. And then about the relationship between 1,000 hectares and 1,700 hectares of land generated by the Lantau Tomorrow vision. There was a very clear observation made by the task force on land supply. 1,200 hectares of land is the total amount of land that we are short of. So don't mix it up with 1,700 hectares of land under the new vision. And the task force also said that we have to prepare for the rainy days, and we have to consider for the future of Hong Kong. We need to set up a land reserve. So our people took a look of it, and we looked at the parameters, depth of water, water currents, initial ecological parameters, etc. So in relation to the Central Waters Reclamation, 1,700 hectares of land would be a feasible figure, pending further studies. Of course, the government has said that for the first phase, what is firm is that we talk about 1,000 hectares of land near Kao Yi Chau. So when compared with the East Lantau metropolis of 1,000 hectares of land in the options of the task force consultation document, they are the same. So the task force is going to provide a report to us, and I'm sure the task force has got a lot of information for us of great reference value. And then yesterday, there was a question that is for whom Kao Yi Chau is to be reclaimed. We need to give this answer to the public. Now, let me tell you why we want to have the reclamation at Kao Yi Chau. I think what we are facing is as follows. And as the CE has said, for the land to be generated at Kao Yi Chau, well, there will be 70% of the land generated to be dedicated to public housing. In other words, 150 to 260,000 units to be generated. In other words, 105,000 to 180,000 units will be in the form of public housing. Let me elaborate on this concept. Now, for Tung Chung Extension, Kwu Tung North, Hon Shui Kiu, and then Yuen Long North and Fanning North, all of them would only provide 129,000 public rental flats. For Kwu Tung North and Fanning North, we started the planning in year 2008. We hope that we can come here next year to get funding from the LegCo so as to embark on land resumption and other things. For Tung Chung, I'm grateful to the LC that is end of or second half of last year, we were given the money. We started work for Hong Shui Kiu. The planning has been completed. We hope that we can come back to the LegCo next year so as to get your funding approval. For Yuen Long South, again, we are working on the planning. For the four areas, when added together, the number of public rental flats available would be 129,000. For Kao Yi Chau, if we take the upper limit, it would be 182,000 units. So please look at the crisis of public housing, and it can greatly help to fill the shortfall. And then every year, we need 28,000 public units. So Kao Yi Chau alone can meet our demand for 6 to 7 years. So when we have a discussion on this matter, we can never forget about such facts. And then, of course, you will say, please go elsewhere to look for 1,000 hectares of land. Why must we have Kao Yi Chau? Well, for Kao Yi Chau, it has a strategic position, and it cannot be replaced by any other options. First of all, it gives us the opportunity. Alice Mack has made the point forcefully. We are able to ease the huge pressure on the transport infrastructure in Tuen Mun and Yuen Long. And then they can come to Lantau, Kao Yi Chau, and then they can reach the town center easily. And then, in terms of the population distribution of Hong Kong, it can be rationalized. Without Kao Yi Chau reclamation, it means that we still have to deal with the housing needs. And unavoidably, it means that we need to house more people in NT North. Maybe pencil-like high-rise buildings or resorting to other means. Maybe we'll have to go to NT East, NT West. So other than Tung Chung Extension, all of them will take place in NT North, NT West. Now, we have said that we would like to have 310,000 units. Most of them will be offered in the new territories, especially in the West. So there will be more pressure. How are we going to address the problem of transport infrastructure? So by taking this move, the population distribution will be more rational. And Kao Yi Chau is closer to the town center. And then it will be appropriate and adequate housing for those who move there. As I have said, for Sam Shui Po and Yau Chun Mong, districts, if we want to reduce the density, instead of 50, we have 40,000 people per square kilometer. We need to rehouse 150,000 people. So if you ask them to move to the new territories, several tens of kilometers away, then you can tell the difference. And then for Kaohsiung, it is really strategically located, and it can become the third CBD. I think Alice Mack and one other member like Eddie Chu talked about the case of Hon Shui Kiu. Now for Hon Shui Kiu, it will provide a lot of opportunities, job opportunities, 15,000 of them for logistics industry. But Hon Shui Kiu is not ready as a CBD. If you look at the case of the Central, and now Kwun Tong will become the second CBD. For Kaohsiung is 10 kilometers from Hong Kong Island, from the Central. Now, I'm not being sort of saying anything to show disrespect towards Hon Shui Kiu. There are constraints. We can't have wishful thinking. We can't just impose our wish there. Now, for Kaohsiung, it will and it can become our third CBD. So please read 2030 Plus study. I think this has been clearly spelled out there. Technically speaking, whether in terms of engineering feasibility or climate change, yes, the society is concerned about it. We recognize such worries and will face them. And then earlier on, there was this article or a declaration from the Hong Kong Engineering Institute of Engineers. They have said that, in fact, the technology is mature. Many countries, cities all over the world have successfully completed similar projects. And in fact, the Kok International Airport of Hong Kong is one of the outstanding examples. In fact, it has been seen that we can look at the height of the waves and we can look at all other factors. And they have all been tested and it has been addressed. It won't be difficult to consider the following solution. Say, for example, building a taller or higher seawall and placing the dolos to withstand the waves. I think come next year, we're coming back to the FC to get the money. So I hope everybody will consider the arguments. In terms of the financial commitment and whether we are able to afford it, I think a lot has been said. I won't elaborate on that. So in simple terms, we are spending $100 billion a year on public works projects. For the Kaohsiung reclamation, it will cost us $130 to $150 billion. And in fact, if we spread the amount of money needed over 10 years or so, you can tell that we can afford it. Now, members have also said that even if we don't go ahead with Kaohsiung Artificial Island, we need to go ahead with other transport projects like Route 11 or the Tsuen Wan Tuen Mun rail link. At least half of it is something that we have to plan and implement. So with Kaohsiung, it means that we will be even more justified to build the infrastructural items. I was surprised to hear why somebody is objecting to the reclamation. Now, let me make this clear. We aren't saying that we are going to start reclamation next year. No, no, no. Well, in fact, we are simply trying to start going through a number of procedures. First of all, town planning. We need to have the planning and engineering study. Within the study, we will be able to gather many data and then we can answer many questions. So on the one hand, you say that the government has got many assumptions and we haven't come clean about the data. On the other hand, you say that you don't support us carrying out the studies. I would say that you are contradicting yourself. We need to have an evidence-based attitude that's scientific, and I think that's the right way to go about our work. Mr. Stephen Ho has said that he's concerned about the marine department, he's concerned about the impact on the fishery industries. And then, of course, in our study, we'll address the concerns about the impact on the marine ecology. Well, from the 1980s up to 2014, 2015, there were lots of studies. as to why we've selected the central waters. The water depth is shallower, and also its impact on the marine ecology is also less serious. Mr. Ted Hui mentioned the question of the demand and supply. And again, I was taken aback. Now, we talk about the same demand. If we increase the land supply, then the prices would come down. I think this is merely basic economic principles. So I found it difficult to understand. On the one hand, you are fighting back, you are criticizing land hegemony. Now, if the government can come up with a plan to say that over a period of time, we can greatly increase the land in Hong Kong, of course, you may have other reasons to say that you object to the concept. But on simple things like demand and supply, there's no way that you can object to it. If we find opportunities to increase the land supply, not to mention the developers. Now, for land, with land, we can provide housing, we can provide land for other purposes. Without land, we can't do anything. Well, Dr. KWOK said that we suffer from shortages and this and that. But then when it comes to more land for housing the facilities, he has a lot of doubts and he would be very suspicious of our plans. Why? Why is it so? Now, if you care to read the paper from the task force, I think it is very clear. For the short-term tenancy sites or the temporary government land allocation, we are merely talking about the works area, the construction sites. Upon completion of the works, quite a lot of them would become part of the built facilities. For the unallocated land and also unleased government land, there are about 800 of them. But then the majority of them have a size of less than 500 square meters. In other words, they cannot be used to build high-density residential developments, but still we've set aside $1 billion to subsidize NGOs so that they can apply for the funding, so that they can make good use of the premises on such land or make use of such sites for non-profit making purposes. Well, some has asked us as to why we don't resume land all over Hong Kong so that we have new development areas all over the place. First of all, as far as our legal system is concerned, we do respect private property rights. Now, unless we can prove our case, unless we can meet the prerequisite, we cannot resume land. That is, we need the land for public purpose. For road, for housing, etc. And that should be preceded by planning. We have to plan to tell us whether there is a public purpose. Now, you remember that starting from 2014, we have already identified 210 sites. Now, 4-5 years later, we have completed 50-60% of them. But then we have about 90 more sites in this category. For new development areas, I think you are aware of the difficulties involved in the lengthy process. For Hon Starry Lee, we've just completed the process, and for LEUNG South, it is not going to have a huge capacity in accommodation. It cannot accommodate a lot of people. And then we are trying to see if there are other new development areas. But as I have said, for NDAs, for Gudong, North, etc. Well, if you care to read the papers in the past, at first we said that the first intake of population will be 2019.
So what is the reality now? We hope that next summer we can come and seek funding, and then we can start resuming the land. That's the fact or reality. So working on NDAs may not be faster than reclamation work. That's pointed out by some members. I hope that that will not be the case. So that's why we need to make use of market forces better. For the land sharing pilot scheme, one of the advantages is that in terms of planning, we don't count on the government taking the lead in planning. We do have limited resources, and also we don't have to resume land because the land belongs to some private owners already. The third, I would like to appeal to members to look at the public interest in the PA. The CE said clearly here, through such a pilot scheme, the new GFA, 60 to 70% majority will have to be used for public housing development. And the details of this scheme will be mapped out in the next year by the Development Bureau. We will do the relevant work, and then we'll come back to report to the LegCo. I'd like to talk about the industrial building revitalization and the lift modernization scheme. The Mr. Ma Hon Kwok said that the 10% of the GFA, can that be used for recreational purposes? We hope to come back to the LegCo by the end of the year to give you the details. I think Mr. Ma's suggestion ties in with our original plan, and that is to say these are the commercial facilities already operating in the industrial buildings, as long as they don't pose safety hazards and they cannot be accommodated in other commercial facilities, and that will meet with our requirement. Now, the lift modernization subsidy scheme, Mr. Lam Chuk-tung is worried about bid rigging. We share that kind of concern. We promised that we would work together with the URA to make sure that there is no bid rigging. Mr. Lam Chuk-tung also mentioned about URA's consultants assisting in the acceptance of lift repair work. Last night, I have confirmed that once the work has been completed, the MSD will do some gatekeeping, and then the URA's consultant will look at aspects other than the safety aspect, for example, the other mechanical works, and the URA will provide the technical assistance to the owners' corporation. So I speak and I urge members to support the motion of thanks.
各位議員。
Secretary for the Environment. I would like to thank members for offering comments on the environmental affairs in the policy address. We have introduced new initiative to deal with climate change, and we have attached importance to the protection of the environment. I will be responding to members in brief.
And on improving air quality, we do care about the roadside air quality, and for the past few years, by improving the emissions of commercial vehicles, the roadside concentration of key air pollutants, including the respiratory suspended particulates and the nitrogen dioxide concentration, had dropped by 30%. And you can see that these measures have been effective. And this year's policy address will continue to improve air quality on all fronts, and a lot of members have responded positively to our focus, including Mr. Frankie Yik and Mr. Gary Chan and Kenneth LEUNG. I must remind us that we need to work with the members and the sectors, as well as enhance regional cooperation to, including the Greater Bay Area, to improve the roadside air quality. That we will follow up. And this policy address where the private vehicles are concerned, will consider first banning the first registration of diesel private vehicles, and will step up communication with the sector for the early implementation of the policy. And Mr. Gary Chan also cared about electric vehicles, and he mentioned that these concern on the electric franchise buses, and have communicated with him, and his information not entirely correct. The last year's figures, there are 22 electric buses. This year is 28, and the next year there will be 36. In other words, there will be a year-on-year increase on a steady pace. And on climate change and for the extreme weather, for example, after Typhoon Mangkhut, The government establishing policy, including the Action Plan of 2030, of setting the point reduction in accordance with the Paris Accord, and hope that the commitment all fronts to control the increase of not than 2 Celsius. And also notice that globally there will be research that we need to step up the effort to control the increase by no more than 1.5 Celsius. And government had made early preparation and earlier had invited the Council on Sustainable Development to conduct a public engagement. The relevant document within will be discussed in this legislative year. So I hope there will be more interaction, collaborations, and innovation. So in terms of the energy supply and transport and waste reduction to allow to reduce our carbon footprint and waste reduction. And some members are concerned on the renewable energy, and this policy address also a step up his work. And Dr. Junius Ho and Mr. Kenneth LEUNG have concerned the government's work on this front. And government will take a gradual approach, including introducing the feed-in tariff, as well offering the relevant tax concessions. And the Development Bureau and the EDB will work together that in some buildings to provide more incentives to install photovoltaic cells. And the numbers were encouraging. And for the use, the renewable energy facilities and the tariff is about dozens or so. And after 1st of October, the overall applications is about 700, which is a tenfold increase previously. So it is showing early results. Hope you can continue to support. And government shall lead by example. The policy just mentioned that we will devote resources and using different sites, including in the reservoirs, to expand our floating PV system. And also exploring how do we install solar energy facilities in landfills so as to better utilize the site and expand the scope. And a lot of members also concerned about the waste reduction. And we need to make much extra effort. It's not like to do with the stresses on our landfills, but also we have to do the decarbonization and reduction of waste. After Typhoon Mangkhut, so that we have to expedite how to do the progress on this path. The government will take multi-pronged approach and looking at the advanced cities, for example, in Seoul and Taipei. And they have implemented the solid waste charging scheme 2 decades ago, which were effective in waste reduction. And there were challenges in their implementation. I hope that we can all be innovative and bring ideas to create a green city. A lot of members also agreed that this municipal waste charging is our fire engine in providing and pushing waste reduction. So there's a lot of room for waste reduction, for example, on kitchen waste and disposable plastic, and to substitute in other plastic. There's also room for waste reduction. So this waste charging can instead encourage you to do that. And we push the relevant sectors to reduce their packaging. And at the same time, we could utilize our existing recycling facilities. The government had gradually boosting the infrastructure support recycling, for example, the recycled glass containers and disposable plastic beverage containers. And next with kitchen waste and commercial kitchen waste, we'll start with the industrial pilot scheme that will expand to other sectors. So that will be conducted in parallel with the waste charging. And we also have a holistic strategy on solid waste charging with education first, and with community support and outreach teams, as with the enforcement as the last line of defense. So we take a multi-layered approach in taking forward. And after the passage of this bill, and back on there will be a 12 to 18 preparation period as adaptation, and there will also a 6 months adaptation period in terms for enforcement. I hope that members will offer more views at the Bills Committee stage to help this bill to help reducing waste and carbon footprint. The disposable plastic have been affecting our coastline, and this policy address will do more work. For this, we will carry out the study to compare the local practices to see how it can become sustainable and to prepare the relevant legislation and as well as plan for substitute. And the government will lead by example to phase out plastic in our own venues to reduce the amount of disposable plastic. And for conservation, the government is beefing up its effort, and recently the size of country parks has increased. In the next few years, we'll plan for the 25th country park in Robin's Nest in Chateau Kok, almost 500 hectares. And with cross-border collaboration, for example, for the ELM, will enhance the conservation factor, expanding the country park areas, as well as to step up the conservation of as high ecological value locations. And finally, Hong Kong's green efforts will go forward. We will continue to watch that and hope the members can join us, and so that we can throw less rubbish and to stop being a big waste. To urge members to support the motion of thanks by Mr. Starry Lee.
Secretary for Home Affairs. President, first of all, I'd like to thank members who have spoken on themes related to arts and culture. Let me give an account of the development in these areas. We have conducted a survey on physical fitness, because the level of fitness is closely related to participation in sports, and also an important indicator of the achievement under Sports for All initiative. We propose that there should be a longitudinal physical fitness survey so as to help us set long-term goals and direction for under the Sports for All initiative. We would involve other departments such as Education Bureau, Food and Health Bureau, and the Department of Health in taking forward health-related work. We will continue to review on how we can provide better support to NSAs and also enhance their governance. We are going to introduce the first phase of enhancement measures. We will increase funding for subvented NSAs and their teams in participating in international competition, as well as to increase the subsidy for athletes with limited means. Our athletes have made good achievements in international competitions in the Asian Games and Asia Paralympic Games. We'll continue to support the development of elite sport and help them to get good results from the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games and other international competitions. We also provide other support services such as training, sports science, and sports medical services, as well as upgrading the facilities of Hong Kong's sports institution. Mr. Wong Ting-kwong asked us to look at the facilities which can be used by visitors. We are implementing the Kai-Tak Sports Park, and at the end of this year, we're going to award the relevant contracts with a view of a completion of the works in 2022 and 2023. So the world-class facilities can be provided to promote sports development, as well as to attract the hosting of more international level sports events in Hong Kong. At the same time, we're going to continue to implement the 5-year plan on the sports and recreational facilities, and to promote sports for all in the community. In the past 2 legislative sessions, 10 items have been approved by this Council to go ahead. We will continue to submit more funding application in due course, and we count on members' continued support for this. And this year, the government has announced that $500 million will be injected into the mega event funding scheme to encourage a private sector subvention of major sports events. We hope the funding approval can be given by the councils as soon as possible so that we can start the new scheme in 2019. Mr. Hon Kwok has asked us to provide support to local arts groups so that more quality shows can be organized. Starting from 2018 and 19, we are going to increase the level of support, including 9 major arts and performance groups, including by 10% and also by 30% for the Hong Kong Arts Development Council. The subvention level will continue to rise in the coming years. And we will help the local artists and arts groups to participate in performances and exhibitions both on the mainland and overseas, so that more opportunities will be made available to local artists. And there will be another event in Shanghai next year in November. We would send a delegation. And for development of venue, apart from West Kowloon cultural area, LCSD has also got other 16 major venues. We have reserved $20 billion for the next 10 years for the purpose of improving or constructing more cultural and arts facilities, and that will be the project for East Kowloon Cultural Center, and there will also be a pre-construction studies for other facilities, and we are also going to the upgrade and Hong Kong Cultural Center. And East Kowloon Cultural Center is expected to be completed in 2020. We also provide more funding to Arts Development Council, and through leasing premises from private property owners, we have taken up 16,000 square feet of space, and it will be offered to the artists and arts groups at lower than market rent. And Ms. Eunice Yung has asked us to give a report at the end of this year. We'll come back to discuss with members the progress. We are going to launch a pilot scheme to promote local publishing and art and creative art. And lastly, this year marks an important milestone for West Kowloon Cultural District. The first venue, Sichu Center, will be commissioned at the end of this year. Official opening will take place in January next year. It would facilitate the promotion of young talents and opera creativity. The free space would be commissioned, which will give a new experience next year. M+ building and after the commissioning of M+ building and the Palace Museum, there will be 2 world-class museums fronting on the Victoria Harbour. And also the theatre construction work has just begun, and WKCDA would make it a priority to develop the facility into a music center. The government will continue to monitor the work and planning of various facilities so as to achieve the vision. Secretary for Transport and Housing. Thank you, President. First of all, I'd like to thank all the members who have offered comments on transport and housing. And here's my response to their opinion. Well, one of the strategies to promote transport services is the Hong Kong e-mobility. Well, 90% of the traveling public use public transport. On a daily basis, more than 4 million people use a franchise bus service. The policy address proposed waiving the tolls and tunnel tolls and road tolls paid by franchise buses. And the savings achieved by the franchise bus operator will be saved under dedicated funds so as to alleviate the pressure on fare increase in the future. We are pressing ahead with full speed to prepare for the implementation. Our objective is to amend the relevant subsidiary legislation at the early next year so that we can go for full implementation of the proposal. To ensure to further improve operation safety of franchise bus and to ensure that our people can enjoy the safe and reliable and efficient franchise bus services, the policy address proposes earmarking $500 million to help franchise bus operators to retrofit the free safety devices, including stability control services, and also speed limiter, as well as retrofitting safety belts on all upper deck seats of long-haul bus routes. We will fund. We will provide 80%. We'll fund 80% of the relevant costs. This particular subsidy scheme will be launched within the 2019-2020 financial year. To further facilitate the planning by passengers, the policy address proposes that we would develop a mobile app to collect information on GMB by installing GPS and allow passengers to access the Transport Department's website and the Hong Kong e-mobility mobile app so that they would know the real-time arrival information of GMB routes. And the relevant information can also be made available to the public through data.gov.hk, and bus GMB operators can also make use of the data to improve their management and efficiency. The government would likewise make use of the data to improve planning and management of public transport by referring to some big data analysis on riding habits and market demand. We would launch this proposed scheme in 3 years, and by early 2022 the system will be up and running. We'll introduce on the 1st of January 2019 the non-means tested public transport fare subsidy scheme. If the monthly transport expenses of a passenger exceeds $400, then there will be a subsidy of the excess to the tune of 25%, and this cap at $300 per month. There's no need to submit any application, and starting from the 16th of February, people will be able to get the subsidy applicable for January. There will be there was already a briefing organized by the Transport Department last Thursday, and members of the public can access our website for details of the scheme. The Transport Department would work on the introduction of Central Hong Kong Ferry Service and the pilot scheme on water taxi. We'll consult stakeholders, and we expect this would inject a vibrancy into the Hong Kong harbour front. On the redistribution of cross-harbour traffic in the 3 tunnels, well, I thank members for their valuable comments. We are glad that most members are in favor of this scheme. The government proposal can achieve 4 results. First, it will alleviate cross-harbour traffic. It would reduce the length of queue at CHT and EHC by 10% or 40%. It would save travelling time by 13 minutes. Second, it would alleviate many road junctions affected by cross harbor queues and affect those passengers and reduce the impact on passengers who are not actually crossing the harbor. And passengers and motorists of private cars and motorcycles as well as taxi passengers will only pay the specified toll from 2020 up to the end of the WHC franchise period. There's no need to face any toll increase pressure. And also, every day, nearly 600,000 people cross the harbor by using a franchise bus during peak hours. The scheme would make traffic smoother and save time for the traveling public. Annually, the scheme would achieve savings of $800 million for our community. It will also reduce 3,800 tons of CO2 emission and improve air quality. I have to stress that the government has relied on scientific modeling projections in the formulation of the scheme, where we have analyzed different toll levels and the effects of such plans. We note that some members would like to reduce the tolls for CHT or EHT so as to further depress the tolls for under WHC, or to put a cap on the tolls for the three tunnels combined. According to our analysis, this would make things worse than before, and therefore it's not feasible. Some have said that more drivers using the EHC will continue to use EHC despite the changes in tolls. But I have to stress that even if some are diverted to use other tunnels, there will be benefits to be gained. On the 16th of this month, we are going to give a detailed account to the members of the transport panel and the relevant data that we have gained through our studies. We hope members can support this scheme, which will benefit the entire community. On the railway infrastructure, the high-speed rail Hong Kong section was commissioned on the 22nd of September 2018. Normal operation started the following day. It has been running smoothly in the first month. The railway line provided service to 1.6 million passengers, and it's now more convenient for people commuting between Hong Kong and the mainland. We are now taking forward the relevant relevant works to commission the South to Central line, and because of the investigation in respect of Hong Ham as station, we need to review the commissioning target for Hong Ham to Taiwan to Hong Ham sections. We continue to monitor the works with a view to early commissioning. And the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge was formally opened for use on the 24th of October after 9 years of construction. And the major trunk road linking the Kok Ka-ki to the south, linking up with North Lantau Highway, was also commissioned at the same time. This would have alleviated the traffic pressure on the airport island. So far, the traffic at the Hong Kong boundary crossing facilities, the airport, and Tung Chung has been smooth. In order to deal with the large number of passengers using the shuttle bus service during peak hours, the Transport Department has worked out something with the tourism industry to introduce improved crowd management measures. And we would continue to launch more measures to respond to passenger demand and transport conditions. On local infrastructure, the final testing stage for the Central and Wai Chai Bypass and the Eastern Corridor Link Road has reached the final stage. It's expected that it would be open for traffic in the first quarter next year, or it would provide a more convenient direct route for people going between the Central and North Point. We'll continue to create a good environment for pedestrians. We would carry out certain trial schemes in Central and Sham Shui Po and test out new innovative standards and produce and create a comfortable walking environment. And apart from the Barrier 3 and universal accessibility scheme, the Transport Department will also look at we'll start the feasibility study for 120 pedestrian roads in regard to the feasibility of retrofitting or the building lifts. Let me now turn to housing. Housing is the #1 priority for the current term government. The problems are, of course, very acute. We are determined to do our utmost to provide affordable and suitable housing and to help our people improve their living environment. As the Chief Executive has pointed out in the policy address, because of the low supply of housing, the average waiting time for public housing has become longer and longer, and private housing prices are beyond affordability of normal families. So the property prices in the private sector have exceeded the affordability level. So in the future, we'll refer to the income level of non-PRH households. The government will also review the long-term housing strategy and look at the target for the next 10 years and the ratio between public and private housing, and so that we can update the housing supply targets for next decade. And in the 10 years starting from 2018-2019, the objective is to provide 460,000 units, and the ratio between public and private will be 60-40. And there will be another projection for the next decade starting from 2019-20 to 2028-2029. We would announce the results in due course. We understand the members of the public have different ideas about the ratio and the housing target. In deciding on the housing supply target for the next 10 years, we will certainly take on board such views. Some members query why we should provide more subsidized housing. For those who do not want to, who cannot afford to buy a home, we will provide public rental housing. But people have a great demand for the home ownership. We have seen oversubscription to a great extent for green form subsidized housing and HOS, as well as, so that we know that people would like to support the policy so that we can rekindle their hope of home ownership. We have asked the Hong Kong Housing Authority and the Hong Kong Housing Society to introduce new measures to ensure the rational and effective utilization of public housing resources. First, we have proposed to the Housing Authority to make reference to the implementation of subsidized housing leasing scheme. The HA and HS would look at the progress. I've heard members offering views on the schemes. We will make reference to the suggestions, and also in particular the suggestion that we should allow the letting of the entire flat. We would like to improve the turnover of public housing, and also to help the families living in substandard accommodation. Second, we have accepted the suggestion from the Housing Society so that there will be a pilot scheme for a flat-for-flat exchange scheme for elderly owners, so that owners who are over 60 years of age and have been living in a subsidized housing flat for 10 years to buy a smaller flat and sell the original flat in the secondary market. The policy address also introduced a new concessions allowing the households where all the members are elderly over the age of 70 to move to smaller PRH flats, and then they will enjoy the lifelong rent-free concession. The policy address has also mentioned the new housing initiatives, and also the new price setting mechanism for HOS. The new mechanism would will look at affordability and make sure that 75% of the flats offered would be affordable by the families whose income is at the medium level. Under the new mechanism, for the HOS flats offered in 2018, the discount would be lower from 30% to 48%. But this is not a fixed mechanism. The discount will be adjusted in line with the data at the time, such as the median income of non-property owner families, as well as the assessed market value of HOS flats. So in the future, the discount may be higher or lower than the 48% for this particular batch. And another new measure announced on the 29th of June is to invite the URA to offer a starter home pilot scheme to help applicants who are not eligible for HOS while private housing are not affordable to them. We expect to offer 450 flats in the first batch. The pre-sale would take place in December this year. And another measure is to use nice sites for public housing, which are originally earmarked for auction. This will produce 10,600 PRH units so as to address the shortage of supply, and to assist the Hong Kong society in redeveloping old estates so as to increase supply of public housing. A site at Kai Tak will be given to Housing Society as a recipient estate for the Chen Xun Mei Chun, so that it can be redeveloped. And that's another measure to impose additional rates on vacant first-hand private residential properties. We will table a amendment bill in 2018-19 legislative session. The additional rates would take effect after the gazettal of the new amendment ordinance. Although we haven't really introduced this new measure, but we have noted that since the announcement, developers have already sold 8,900 flats in this, which the developers have stockpiled in the past. we will continue to monitor the market closely. The fifth measure is that the Lands Department has revised the pre-sale agreement scheme arrangements to enhance transparency and consumer protection. As at the 30th of September, the Lands Department has approved 12 such applications with the new requirements incorporated into the conditions. The Lands Department and the first-hand residential property regulation authorities would continue to monitor the work of the market. We need time. It takes time to identify land for housing. So apart from the long-term measures, we need to look at new initiatives such as the Land House Tomorrow vision. At the same time, we would facilitate the implementation of various proposals which may be community-led to produce a transitional housings, and so as to help the families on the waiting list of PRH. We have set up a task force to take forward more such schemes. I thank members for their support on transitional housing and the concern they've expressed on tenants of subdivided flats. We like to let these people see hope. We would like the members to continue to give their support for more transitional housing projects. Mr. President, transport and housing affects our daily life. We are determined to tackle the problems. There are a number of measures have been proposed in the policy address as we have actively respond to social aspirations. Maybe there are differences in opinions by different stakeholders, but we will always put the public interest first. We'll continue to forge community consensus as we move ahead. I urge members to support the motion of thanks. That's the end of the fourth session.
We now proceed to the fifth debate session. The debate theme is reinforcing strength